So I'm a second year student at UMass, and here at the Five College Center I study Turkish, but my major is Middle Eastern Studies, and I also study Arabic.
Okay. Arabic at the center as well?
Dialect course, yes.
Okay, very nice. So why did you decide to, I guess we can focus on either Turkish or Arabic or both, whatever, but why did you decide to pick up those two languages?
Well, when I was in high school, I went on a study abroad program. I was a sophomore in high school, and it was just an opportunity to explore a new area. I'd never been really outside the US before, and so going to Turkey was a new experience for me, which brought on this aspect of learning Turkish. And I really came to enjoy learning the language. You know, in a classroom setting in high school, it was very different and than being in the country itself. So Turkish was a whole new world than, you know, apart from Spanish that I was learning in high school. And so I just came to love this country, this language that the people spoke, and felt like it was very much a part of the culture. And that if I wanted to wholeheartedly embrace this another country, another like nation, that I should also learn the language, which I came to find is very beautiful.
And that then you transferred to Arabic too, that there's no way you could do Middle East stuff without the language, or?
Yeah, I always thought that Arabic was also a very beautiful language and just so interesting because of the dialects, which I didn't know until I started learning Arabic, and I thought, wow, this is a completely new, complex puzzle to like take on and try to unravel. And yeah, I think I really love learning languages, especially when I know it's going to be eventually used within the country that it is spoken. I mean, Spanish never took me outside of a US classroom setting, which didn't make it interesting.
So you talked a little bit about this just now, but how did going abroad change your perceptions of the language? I don't know if you'd had any thoughts about Turkish before you went, and what are you thinking now in terms of the place of language in Turkish society, for example, how difficult it is? Is it more or less important to study now that you've been abroad? So how did going to the country, with or without prior language experience, change how you view that language specifically and languages in general, if at all?
Okay, so before I went to Turkey, most people were going to Europe when I was a part of that program and talking about, you know, French and Spanish, these languages that are more widely spoken, and I thought about, I did have a thought that Turkish is not spoken by many people. I think it's maybe 90 million. And that idea was completely erased, though, after I started learning it. And coming back here, I did realize that it is spoken in different areas of the world. And I don't think that it's not as widely spoken as Spanish and French and other languages, that it is not as important. And I just think it's so strongly linked to culture, that language is, that it's very important to embrace these lesser known languages. Even though they're lesser known, doesn't mean that they're less important than those other languages that are more widely spoken, because you can speak in a foreign language and you're like, when you speak, you're also displaying the culture of the place too, I guess. And so and then working here, I didn't even know that, these other very, minor languages existed also. So I'm kind of still coming to terms with how I view like lesser known languages with ones that are more widely spoken, but I definitely think there's a strong link to culture and that they're still very important.
So would you say you're more motivated to learn languages after having gone abroad?
Definitely, because I did learn that it was very much part of the culture. It's just as important. I don't know if you can come to understand a culture fully without speaking the language.
Why is it important for you to study Turkish and Arabic, having seemingly no direct connection to that part of the world or that culture? Why is it something that you want to devote at least 4 years of your study, if not more time or career to?
Okay, so I've thought a lot about cross-cultural communication, and like I said before, I think culture is strongly linked to language. So with Turkish, it's a bit different from Arabic because I do have a tie to Turkish because I live there, for almost a year, and so I have connections to friends and family that, of course, I want to go back and speak Turkish with them, because you understand people at a whole other language when you speak to them in their native language. And Nelson Mandela he said once that if you speak to a man in your language, it goes to his head. If you speak to a man in his language, it goes to his heart. So to really come to understand people that you're trying to study or, observe, take back information from them to people who don't understand these, people in the Middle East or Turkey, which is what I might want to try to do, is tell Americans about Turkish people or the Arab world, is to be able to speak the language so that you come to understand them by heart. So with Turkish, it's a bit different, but with Arabic, I really have never been there, and so I've started out to learn the language because I know it's the first step to reaching this potentially high point where I can come to understand people there and understand their way of life, so that I almost can feel it myself, although I don't know if that's an attainable level for a foreigner.
So you think just, maybe you could live in an Arab country or Turkey for 5 years and not speak the language? You don't think you'd ever be able to reach that level of knowing, knowledge, comfort, whatever in that country?
I do struggle with this idea because I did meet people in Turkey that were not Turkish, but they had lived there for 5+ years and still did not speak the language, and they had struggles every day. And I met a man who actually one day woke up and said, I'm going to learn this language, and by the time I got there and met him, he was almost fluent. And I wish I'd gotten to speak to him more about it, but I really don't know if he was able to really connect at a level that, I would have thought I wanted to, but maybe he didn't want to. So I don't know that kind of feeling. I guess you could probably ask someone who has been in a country for a long time and what they think, if what they're trying to reach, and they don't speak the language. So,
but for you personally?
For me personally, I think it's also respectful to live in a country. I think, in my opinion, if you live in a country for over a year, you should be making an effort to learn the language. If you're there for a few months, I can understand why it's not as important to you. But if you live for over a year, I think it's out of respect for the culture, the people, and the country.
You think even in America too? This just reminded me, this is random.
I feel like don't speak English in America.
I feel like it's so weird to say the opposite about America. It makes us seem like bigoted or whatever.
No,
to
I
be
don't
like,
think so.
you have to learn English in America. You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think if you live in America for over a year, you should be making an effort to learn English, which is not to say that you shouldn't keep your own language too and speaking that. But if you can't speak English and you've lived here for over a year, 2 years, 3 years, it doesn't make sense to me. But I guess I would need to talk to more people and come to understand a different way of thinking to change my view, but that's personally my view.
Yeah, I never thought of that because I totally agree with you. That's really interesting. Okay, so in thinking about your abroad experience, I guess it was 2 years ago, right, at this point? 3 years ago?
Oh my gosh, I think it was 4 years ago, actually. I
Oh my
think
gosh.
this past summer was 4 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess mine was too. Oh my gosh. You went in 2012?
2011.
Oh, okay. So when you're thinking about that, and again, we talked about this, and it seems like you didn't engage with the language like in retrospect you wish you had in your year abroad, but what were some of these, this is a two-part question, some of the challenges and then some of the rewards that you experienced from using your language in Turkey?
Okay, so my learning Turkish was difficult for me at first because I was very shy at the time when I went, and that hindered a lot of my progress in the language. But there are specific moments. A challenge for me was most definitely with my first family, who I don't think they were in the mindset to take on a foreign exchange student. They didn't really understand these cultural, issues that were going to come up, and that made me not want to speak Turkish at all, made me know that they would laugh at me, that they didn't know what they thought of me. So that was a challenge, to talk to people who couldn't be open about learning languages. They themselves didn't speak foreign languages, they only spoke Turkish, so I don't think they really understood what it was like for someone to learn Turkish. And that did come off on me as not wanting to talk and feeling very shy. With my second family, it was a completely different experience because they had learned English. and other languages, and they knew that I was learning, and so they were more open, and I could feel that sense of, you know, I would talk to them, and it was a more rewarding experience. But I think a specific moment where I realized that I really had developed Turkish very well, although during the whole year I thought my Turkish was awful, it's a very bad mindset, and it's very hard to get over it. But my parents both came different times during the year, and I realized that I took them on a tour of the city and talked to shopkeepers here and there and everywhere and bargained and did this and that, and that they were just so impressed, like realized that their daughter spoke a foreign language, and I was like, no, I'm not fluent or anything, but they were like, it doesn't matter, like you've taken us on a tour of the city and we've gotten every place that we needed to go, and it's because of your Turkish, like. And I guess that was a point at which I was like, okay, maybe you're right, but I didn't fully understand that, yeah, I'd really come to progress in the language at that point.
So I'm thinking about another question now. I think that's a feeling that everyone has. Hold on, I'm going to start it out. So a feeling that everyone has where you're like, my language ability sucks, I can't communicate, and then you have moments like that where someone, I think usually it's an external person close to you being like, wow, you've grown and developed. Do you have any advice or tips for someone who's learning a language who might be, you know, in that funk? Because we all plateau at some point, and how can you like get yourself to see your progression if that's possible?
Yeah, and I gotta say though, a lot of people said, don't worry, we won't laugh at you, it's fine, just try to speak it, just do this, just do that, and it would not sink in. And I don't know if I myself could tell another person saying, this is what happened to me, I don't want it to happen to you, I want you to just put yourself out there and do it. And I don't know if just words would be able to tell someone the first time they studied abroad, and for them to be able to say, I remember what that girl said, or I remember the advice, and do it. I feel like being in a foreign environment for the first time, you're just so struck by it, and I guess different people have different reactions, but I think if someone like me went abroad and, you know, I tried to give them advice about what happened to me, I still don't think it would go through. But I think the second time they studied abroad, which I haven't experienced yet either, it's coming next year, I think it's going to be different because I've learned the first time. And I think just people have to learn on their own. I really do. I don't know if anyone's words could comfort you and tell you and make you realize that it's okay. Like, no, you're learning, it's fine.
In some ways though, I guess that is comfort in itself, right? To hear from someone that we all hit rock bottom. Like, we're all gonna cry in a taxi.
But it's still hard to do it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think you're right that you have to just like do it alone. It's when you feel you're most vulnerable and like you want to cry because the shopkeeper is just not understanding, or you missed a bus or whatever it was, that you're like, I have to get myself out of this situation. There's literally no one else to do it. And that's after you do that, it's like, if I can do that, then I can go buy groceries.
Yeah, you mentioned like, you know, you're the only person there and you have to get yourself out of that situation. I think being put in that kind of situation, that's the only way you can learn to do it. I don't think you can make up a foreign, you know, a fake setting here and say, you're with a shopkeeper, let's do a role play, and like actually feel what it's like to know that you are the only person. The role play is not going to help. Like, you're learning to speak, of course, and using what kind of words you need to use for a shopkeeper, but it's not going to help you with that aspect of learning the language, of getting through, you know, he doesn't understand me. What do I do now? I think only you can experience that. You can't even be told what to do. You have to experience it.
I like thinking about it now, it's stressing me
And
out.
I'm sure we have many of those instances where like they didn't understand us, but I had to get to point A to point B somehow.
So what do you think about how studying languages has affected your life, your studies at UMass, your outlook on relationships, friendships, what you want to do on, like, how has the language study outside of the study itself, because obviously, you know, it's made you a better student, whatever it is, but how has that language study affected your non-language studies, life, whatever?
It's a good question because I guess I could talk about one aspect that I'm very motivated and self-motivated, but I think I was that way before I went to Turkey. I think that was what kind of made me go in the first place. But I guess I could mention the fact that after Turkey, I mentioned all these, feelings of like that I didn't do a good job, I didn't learn the language, I wasn't successful, that it took me a good 2 or 3 years to come to terms with it, and having reflected upon it for 2 to 3 years to finally realize what I had accomplished. And I think what I did learn is that I really can accomplish anything. Like when I first came back, I came back in July 15th, 2012, and I went to school. I started with people that were, younger than me, and I would felt like I was like the worst. Like I failed. I was here. I couldn't speak English. It was just awful. But it took so long for me to realize like all the things I had accomplished. And I think it's studying abroad gives you a new mindset, just a new way to handle situations, a new way to approach things, to think about things. I don't know if it can be explained in words, the kind of experience you learn from study abroad, because it's not tangible. It's like within your mind itself, about how you think in a different way. So I don't know if I can put it into words for you, but I see things differently now than I did before I studied abroad. I don't know who can put it in concrete words and make others understand it. I just think you have to do it yourself.
That's amazing. Wow, that is so, wow, you said that so well.
Mindset.
No, you're right, and you're right that like people could just watch this video. No one's gonna actually watch this video, except for the people like us that have gone abroad and be like, oh yes, because no one, like, you don't know what you're doing until you do it, and then you want that, at least in my case, like you want that community, that sense of like, I definitely connect so much easier with people like you, people who have gone abroad, particularly to the part of the world that I did, than people who haven't. So I, of course, love videos like this where you can just watch other people talk about their language experiences because you can relate, but I can see why at the beginning, like...
But this video might, like, talking about these kind of things might help someone who had just, has just returned from study abroad, because watching this, like, when I first came back July 15th, 2012, it would have helped me. I don't know, helped, but, like, comforted me almost. To hear this, like myself say, or someone who had a similar situation say, in 3 years, you'll realize that everything you did was awesome and amazing, and you should be so proud of yourself for doing that. Because now I think about it and I go, wow, I got from that one time I had to talk to someone and get from point A to point B, and I was so scared and I cried, and I eventually got there. I was like, that's amazing. Like, at the moment right after, I was like, I'm such an idiot. Like, oh my God. But now I'm just like, I did that. Like, that's amazing. In a foreign country, in a foreign language. Like, what? I never would have thought. Like, and then you're like really proud of yourself. So I think you come out with this more, pride in yourself. Like, I think it's a great feeling.
Do you think if you never went abroad again, you would be able to keep that feeling forever?
I think I'd be able to. Of course, as you get older, things, fade, but I feel like if you kept talking about it, talking like this to people about it, talk to others who were going to study abroad, that you would keep it more fresh in your memory. I don't know if it's possible, maybe people do study abroad and then just forget about it. 10 years later, it's something they can't really think back, to and feel that sense of pride in themselves because they've experienced other things that have come to just, blur out that image. But I don't know, a lot of people yet, I guess, that just studied abroad and then forgot about it. Years later, just forgot that they studied in a foreign country and did all those things. But I think it probably changed them as a person. I don't think they could have been the same person if they hadn't. So I don't know if it's a term, forgetting it, but not being able to be the same person again.
I guess it's true. Like I forget, sometimes I'll talk to people that were in Jordan with me like 3-4 years ago, and they will remind me of stuff that I had totally forgot had happened. But the feelings, like when I'm reminded about it, the feelings are definitely just as present as they were, like frustration, just like sheer pride in myself, like the fear that like my heart will start racing again when people talk about, like the street harassers are getting into taxis and like whatever it is. So I feel like the stories themselves will probably fade, but
yeah, and I was talking about this in a class yesterday, that we were talking about culture, and is it possible for someone to uproot themselves from a certain culture and place themselves somewhere else and completely forget about the first culture? Can you do that? Like, is that possible to just reject it? I don't know. I don't think so. But then I talked about adoption and, kids who are uprooted from the age of 2 months and never see China, if they're not from China and this and that. So I don't know, that's a different, aspect. But to be, in a country for, especially at an older age, I think for sure. I don't think you can forget it. I don't think you can reject it. I think it's still there.
I don't know. There were so many times where I was like, I'm a failure, I'm not taking advantage. It took me 3 months into Jordan to ride a taxi by myself. And I think about it now and I'm like, 3 months? That I could have been like chatting it up with the drivers, but like that was how long it needed for me to feel comfortable doing it. And then when I did it that first time, I got like my heart was racing, and it's like stuff that you won't ever forget. So you got to give yourself
back
time.
And say that was the time I needed.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah,
Even
someone
if it's
else could have
7
taken
months.
a week, but like that's okay because 3 months is what it took for me.
It took me 6 months in Morocco before I like made friends, basically, and even then they were mostly foreign friends. So I think what would be really helpful for you is trying to reach out once you get a program and get accepted and everything, reaching out to people on the program. If you don't have names, contacting the people who run it and contacting other people.
Yeah.
Because I think if you can find allies, and like you'll know once you get there immediately who you're gonna like and who you're not. But if you can, I had like one ally in each program. My friend Miriam in Jordan, my friend Laura in Morocco, and that was it. One person that I could like be stupid with and go around and speak bad Arabic with, and then like vent about everything we hated in English after. So important. Otherwise, I would have gone crazy. Like one friend.
No, me
That's all
too.
you need.
It's when I was in Turkey, it was my school, and I particularly didn't love the school, but the people that were in it. First day of class, I went, and my host brother said, "Just take a taxi home." This was week, 3. I'd been in Istanbul for a week. 1 week. Here we go to school. Call a taxi company and go home. And I was like, what? You want me to call who, what, with what Turkish? And I went to school and I was like, I'm never gonna get home, there's no way. And my classmates came up to me and they're like, blah, blah, blah in Turkish. And I was just like, I don't speak Turkish. Oh, you're the foreign girl! Those people that I still talk to today.
Oh my God.
I was almost handed these friends, which I felt like I didn't deserve. And it was, if I hadn't had them, I don't think it would have been. And I almost feel like it's not fair because I was handed them almost. They took me under their wing. Like, when does that happen to someone in a foreign country? It doesn't. Because like you said, it took 6 months to find a really good friend. I was handed friends at the beginning of Turkey.
Yeah.
Which no one else in my program was. So I think that's going to get to Oman and be like, no, I have to meet these people like you're saying and make connections like that because it's not going to be handed to me. I mean, it could be again and I get lucky, but no, it'll be, that experience for me will be new because in Turkey, it was handed to me. I didn't do anything.
Wow, that'll be really interesting.
And they sent me home. They called the taxi and they got me a taxi and they said, bring her to this house. That's all you do. And he brought me home and that was it. They did everything.
That was one of the harder things about Morocco was making Moroccan friends. And after like 5 months, I realized, and you will definitely, Oman is so much more dramatic. The gender segregation, first of all, most women won't be out chilling after class. They will go right back to home, but right back to their house. No one stays out late except for the shabab. So if you want to like actually engage with people after class, where are they? Back at their houses, cooking and whatever, doing their work, whatever. So just even finding people. But then if you do find like some women in cafes, what are you gonna do? Like go up to them and say, I'm American? No. So you have to have people introduce you and stuff. So that was like so hard for me. And I thought, I speak Arabic, like I lived in Jordan, I can just speak a dialect and get around and like say salam alaikum to everyone and it'll be so cool. And they were like, these women were like, ew, like why would we
the
talk
people
to
in your video
you?
were like, don't worry, you can just use
Yeah.
your Jordanian dialect in Morocco, it'll be good. And you're like, no.
And they're like, why would we talk to you? Like we have our own lives, as they should, right? Like it's not everywhere, especially in big cities where you're going to have people be like, the foreign girl, we want to hang out with you.